Oh. Alright.
I'm Daniel.
I'm Kimberly.
I'm James.
I'm Quick.
Okay, today we're going to talk about the baby boomers and Generation X, Generation Y, and the millennials and how they have their differences. The baby boomers were from 1946 to 1964, and they were sort of like the generation after the silent generation, the World War II, and they had a bit of like a rebellious phase. They sort of like, you know, had the swinging 60s, and they were a bit crazy, like did some drugs and stuff like that, and they sort of didn't really follow the silent generation, like the rules and stuff like that, so to speak. They like more enjoyed themselves and sort of against war and things like that. And they were really understanding with their children and things like that. The guy who I referenced, PJ Rourke, he was in the video on Moodle. He really thought that they were quite spoiled, really, and quite lazy in comparison to generations before them, and they had sort of like had the world the way they wanted it. They were given like a decent world. So yeah, that's the baby boomer generation.
Generation X is next.
Generation X, born after the Western World War II. After the Western post-World War II baby boom, demographics use the dates ranging from the early 60s to early 1980s, and these people are highly educated, self-reliant, independent, and most are entrepreneurs. And fluent with technology, easy to use technology.
They're highly educated.
And have high job expectancy rates. Like to balance their lives a little bit.
That's good.
Good job.
For the Generation Y, these were the children of the original baby boomers. They were known as the Echo Boom generation. They were the first generation to actually have full opportunities for women in the work field. The way to market to this generation would be through music and fashion. The Generation Y children were known as assertive, self-reliant, emotionally and intellectually expressive, and innovative and curious. They're very good with their cell phones, and they had one of the highest recordings for text messaging and communications to their cell phones and internet use to their cell phones. And they like the ability to be able to customize their own products. When advertisement target them, they would use magazines, internet, television, and radio programs. This advertisement strategy was called advergaming.
The millennials are more, they start from 1993 and go up from there. So a lot of places on the internet don't really have like a understanding of the millennials. When I looked it up, it said the millennials were more like Generation Y, but it's actually 1993 and up. That's more like our age people, and they're like more technology based. They're like not as they don't want as many kids type thing as like the baby boomers. They had parents that had a lot of kids after the war and stuff like that.
Population is decreasing.
The population is definitely going down.
Yeah, so each generation has its differences, as you can see. You can see that sort of like the baby boomers and the millennials are completely different. Obviously, it just goes in stages. It just goes in slow stages. Like, so X is slightly more similar to the baby boomers, Y is slightly more similar to X, and then Y is kind of similar to the millennials. So yeah, you can see how the way it goes.
One of the similarities is that both X and Y were both raised in dual careered homes, which means that both the mother and the father were both working at the time.
So we need to discuss how we would position the following products for each generational segment, which is a Honda Civic, an iPhone 6s, and the presidential candidates. So we discussed how a Honda Civic, possibly a baby boomer, might be sort of seen as a family car and something that would just get you from A to B, and it's efficient, fuel efficient, it's economic, nice size, you know. Whereas we thought that possibly a millennial might literally look at it in a completely different light and just think, wow, this car's just so slow, or it's ugly, or something like that. And they don't think about family because they haven't got one, so there's a completely different outlook on exactly the same product.
Another thing about the baby boomers and the Honda Civic, baby boomers are getting ready to retire from their careers, so most likely whenever you retire you like to travel, so that's how the whole fuel efficiency comes into play as well. For the iPhone 6. Yeah.
For the iPhone 6, I think it would definitely be more reliable towards the generation Y and millennials because they're the most tech-savvy generations out of the bunch. They're constantly using and surfing the internet for answers. They're constantly communicating through text messages and using data and those types of things.
We feel that the baby boomer generation is kind of like scared of technology, so something like the iPhone 6 is kind of scary and they don't really want to kind of go near it because they're worried about, like, I don't know, what they won't be able to, I don't know, they might embarrass themselves, like they can't find information and stuff like that, so they got to go see their kids, they got to get educated by the younger generation, which is kind of strange for them. So
Generation X are geeks and independent thinkers, so with the iPhone, once they know it's environmentally friendly and could help them in their work, they're okay with it. They don't need anything extra to be able to sell to them.
One thing that it says about baby boomers when it comes to the internet is they mainly use their internet to surf for health cause related problems. Instead of using for other answers, they mainly use it for their health.
So the presidential candidate is the next thing. I feel like for millennials, me and James touched base on this about the presidential candidate. The millennials mostly don't really research about the presidents that are running or whatever, because they have their parents' opinions and their own opinions kind of mixed in. So something that I thought about whenever we were talking about this, our generation was like, oh my gosh, Obama, he's going to be the first black president, and that's why they voted for him. But they didn't realize what he was for, what was going to happen whenever he got voted in. And that's not to push any political views on anyone either. So.
I think that the baby boomers have a very high influence on the presidential candidate, simply because coming out of the war and being a workforce where they work very hard for the things that they've accomplished, and so therefore they feel like they're very in tuned in the media to try to make the right vote for who would be in charge of this nation. So
the fact that the baby boomers are the older generation, there are still people from the silent generation, but when you think about the kids these days, millennials, their mums and dads are either baby boomer Generation X, so we believe that the baby boomers have got like not a better, but like a more in-depth understanding about the presidential candidate, and which would be the best choice because they know the history over the last sort of 50 years and what good has happened to the country, what bad has happened to the country, whereas like the millennials, they're not really making a decision based on history or based on what things have happened in the past. They're just making up their own opinion and possibly just by what their friends told them and what a few other people told them, and they're not really researching and going in depth to what the consequences of their decisions are going to be.
Alright, that's it, folks.